Chapter 4. Odmir the Coward. Giborn soon became aware of his son's disappearance after the day had ended. Therefore, upon calling his train for a rest, he became in wrath, and sent the 2 men that had marched ahead of Illorn and Emilay to hunt for them, for he knew they were responsible for their lagging behind in some way. These 2 were named Ador and Bajor. They were brothers, and also criminals who were forced to fight or be slain. For by their laziness and lack of desire to do aught well proved them to be of no worth, wherefore they were as good as fat on a pig to Giborn. Though the father of Illorn did not trust them or like them, he bade them to not return without his son, or else suffer death from his blade or hand. He said to them, I'd have taken horse manure for food ere I signed you into my company. Weak and foul men are you. Die in darkness, or die in my combat, but bring my son, and I shall forgive you, and reward you, maybe. No one spoke to Ador, and no one spoke to Bajor. They were brown-haired and buck-toothed. They had little character, and their best smile would cast death upon small forest creatures, for their teeth were green and brought light to even Emilay's figure. Their bodies were bereft of any musculature. They were as hungry and as thin as one could be, while not also being considered malnourished. Bajor, who was once of the house of Bovjorn, ere being named a crime-doer, answered Giborn, Gold and women, I will bring him to you on a king's chariot. Giborn laughed and answered him, Nothing on you is large enough to please a woman, and no gold in any great sum will buy you one, for they will reject your coin indubitably. Bajor had yet to prove him wrong, and Ador made mirth of his brother, though he too was smote by Giborn's fierce quips. And so departed Ador and Bajor into the shadows of night. One might assume their mentioning gives them relevance to the tale of Aullen, but nay, they were lame, as some men were, destined for no greatness or wealth. They died with no mark made in time, for by their greatest achievement in their lives was nurturing the soil with their rotten corpses. The tale returns to Illorn and his friend Emilay. In the dark of night, Illorn could hear naught save the birds which flew around him, anon to land upon him. He hoisted his sword, whilst under the weight of his friend, and swung fiercely without aim. He could feel his blade strike nothing but air, but it seemed so that this deterred the fowl from drawing close. He screamed doing so, knowing naught else to do, but in these moments it dawned upon him that his burthen of fear did little for him in such perilous hours. He thought of his father coming to his rescue, only to find him in such panic state, for so he thought to himself, Death would come ere I let my weakness show. And with a bravery that was returning to him, he stood and continued to swing his sword amain. The cries which came from him became shouts, and the tears that ran from him like a soft kill dried. No night so dark would stop him, no fear so great would thwart him. His rage burned within, and at last he felt his blade strike flesh. This, some say, lasted the entire night. Others would tell you he fought and fended for a week. But in truth, he swung thus for an hour, which is not a short time at all. During this hour he never once saw what it was he swung at, for he did not dare open his eyes. Verily, he knew not if he swung at anything at all. But it did not matter. Not until whatever it was he was fighting had plied upon him in great sum and forced him onto the ground. By then he had grown tired, and his swinging had slowed. But with the fate of luck, this was not his end, for thereupon the many feet upon him flew away, and in his shut eyes he saw light. With the light came a voice, and the voice said, Fear not, child, open your eyes. As Illorn did as he was bidden, though he could see little, for his eyes had become unfocused. The blurred figure came closer to him and said to him, "Why were you causing such ruckus?" "They're come to devour us," Illorn shouted. The figure hushed him, for he spoke much too loudly. "What are come?" "The owls," again shouted Illorn. "The owls are coming." "What owls?" inquired the man. Illorn's eyes adjusted, and before him he saw a ragged figure. He was neither Adder nor Bajor, but his likeness was much the same, as his cheeks and eyes were sunken deep within his skull. Illorn looked hither and yon. Emilay was still present, unscathed, save a large bruise on his forehead. The forest was still cold, and the mud was still wet. All seemed of the norm when the man 'gan to laugh. "Boy, there are no owls." He staked his torch into the ground and aided Illorn with his arise. "If the gods had paid me every time someone came here crying of owls, the heavens and her stars would be mine." Then Illorn, in disbelief, regained his fierceness and did not believe him, for he was assured of being attacked by an owl. "No owls," answered Illorn. "I thank thee for your saving me, but I pray you, I was not feigning mine assault." The man continued to laugh. "Are you mad?" asked Illorn, and therewith he stopped. He then sauntered towards Illorn, bent forward like a ragged hermit. "Mad?" said he. "I'm quite lonely, actually, but not mad. I have nothing to be angry about." Illorn, in fear, stepped back and fell upon the earth, for he had little strength to stand. As the crazed figure continued to draw hither, Illorn took from his back his bow, nocked an arrow, and pointed it at forehead height. "Stop," he shouted, "or I'll put a dart in you." As the figure continued to approach, a queer necklace with a large red jewel came free from under his clothes and dangled before Illorn. The man was quick to hide it again within his dirtied linens. "Don't be such a stupid fool," said he. "If you slay me, then you shall truly die here." Illorn then watched as the man before him began to focus upon the craftsmanship of his bow. "Whither got you this weapon?" he asked. And Illorn responded, "From my name-day, as a gift for passing into manhood." "I asked you whither, not from whom and when." "From mine home and lake home, and from my father, who received it from the craftsman," said Illorn. "And know you the name of its maker?" inquired the man. "His name?" Illorn couldn't recall. "His name was Ormir, or perhaps it was Odir. I can't say with certainty." The figure before him straightened his back, and then stood tall and strong. His mane, which spoke madness, then said sadness, as he corrected Illorn. "His name was Odmir, and that is a name I have not heard for many days, nay, moons." Then Illorn dropped his guard and no longer felt his angst. "If this is the last bow crafted by mine hands, then may you be the son of Giborn. I know your name, it's Illorn, and I have long known that the soul of this bow would one day lead you to me." Thus, Odmir entered Illorn's life, and he then assisted Illorn by carrying Emilay to his cave, which was lit with torches of dung and furnished with stolen crates and barrels, but also sacks of grain and rice, which were often his dinner and supper. In that said cave, Illorn watched his friend sleep long and loudly, as was his wont. Thence he was given a small bowl of cooked rice and beans that were dirtied with mud and small stones that he oft spat onto the floor, though without complaining. Odmir, who lived thus, did not the same, and paid no heed to the small stones in his every meal. He said to Illorn, "Forgive me, son of Giborn, if I had frightened you, but no, there are no owls." A delusional mind such as Odmir's was not uncommon in this age. Their new home was the land of frightening things, such as wolves the size of walls, and cave spiders that loomed webs like blankets across entire valleys. In farther lands in the west, Humanoid beasts, clad only in their pink skin, walked in large hosts and lived within the earth. For by there were crows which were akin to the owls, save for their blackness, and will spy on men from those close distances. The land of Mur was therefore a terrifying place to many, and to some their best escape from their cruel realities was to simply pretend their horrors didn't exist. Illorn, however, was not gullible enough to believe the madness within Oddmere, for his body was marked and scratched by talons. He bled lightly, and this hurts burned him, although when he showed his many marks to Oddmere, the crazed man said to him, "You show me wounds made by sharp thistles and brambles, foolish son of Giborn." Now Illorn could not rest that night, let alone allow his eyes to close. His experience within the forest led him to assume constant danger, causing him to watch the mouth of the cave so that nothing entered it without his knowledge. This, despite the fact that it had been barred by a large stone. More so, Illorn found it rather curious that Oddmere took such great precautions to keep himself safe from the owls, despite not believing in them. He snuffed out all his torches, put out his fire, and burned an herb that masked their smell. All this, despite the impossibility of aught finding them, or moving the stone that kept them safe. And as he lay, ere he slept, he said prayers beneath his breath. "May wisdom govern me, and beauty be in me. May foresight be my light, and instinct work my path." Illorn could scarce understand what was said next, but he only ever heard his father say that prayer ere a great endeavor. He then roused Oddmere as he finished and asked him, "Why say you this prayer so sacred?" And Oddmere responded, "To keep them away." And he therewith fell asleep, saying no more until dawn. In only 4 hours, Oddmere awoke and aroused Illorn. "Fie, your loud friend, why does he yell in his sleep?" He was referring to Emilay's snoring. "Yeah, he does, though heed it not, and you shall hear it no longer," answered Illorn. "Then he will die, and so will we, if anything hears him." Illorn then smiled and laughed to himself, for he then recalled that Emilay was the nephew of the crazed man before him. He thereby inquired of him, "Know you of your brother's son?" Therewith Oddmere turned to him and nodded, but answered, "I have never seen him, though if he is akin to my brother, then fie him. He must be damned with women." Illorn laughed, though he attempted to best hide his mirth. Now Oddmere was not a dumb fellow. He looked upon Emilay for the first time, truly, and saw his complexion. "My father looked thusly when I was young. Nay, my brother, this child, may the gods curse me." And Oddmere then knew that this was Emilay, his nephew. He then bade Illorn to move the stone that kept them safe, and upon so he kicked Emilay and shook his shoulders until he awoke. Oddmere slapped him once, then twice, and as the fat boy's eyes opened, he said, "Oh, Emilay, my brother's son, rouse yourself. It is day." Oddmere then lit his torches and his fire. He threw his chamber pot to Illorn, which was to his cooking pot, and asked him to fetch water for breakfast. When Illorn had returned, he was given potatoes to peel and carrots to cut. At first, Emilay did not stand, let alone speak, or mutter a single word. But when the smell of food grew strong, he shot up, watering like a hungry dog, only confused by his strange surroundings. "Illorn, whither have we gone? And may I say, I see the stains on that pot. They're quite queer, really, and who might you be?" asked he to Oddmere. His uncle forthwith, with a little breath between words, answered, "I am your father's brother, son of my brother. Why, am I pleased to meet you finally. May I say you my name?" Emilay had not the time to answer. "I am Odmir. This is my home. Pleasant and cold. Is it warm? Oh, delightful. The soup is at a boil. Though, pray forgive me, I have no meats." Odmir laughed and rubbed his hands, ere offering to shake Emily's hand. But the boy stood quietly, staring. His 2 buck teeth jutted past his lips. He did not breathe. He did not blink. He only stared, looking blankly into the distance, until finally he answered, "Soup? Delightful. Who might you be?" Odmir's joy soon withered. His smile fled from him, and his patience, which he had little of in supply, was exhausted. 2 times had Emilay knocked over his cooking pot, and 2 times had Emilay poured boiling water onto his uncle. In a short span of 30 minutes, Emilay had fallen onto Omir's store of roots, crushing them into mush, stepping on all his freshly stolen bread, and ruined Odmir's only other shirt, thinking it a wipe for his mortal duties. And when hours passed, he grew bored and began to throw stones, which one by accident hit Odmir on the forehead. Later, when he became tired again, he climbed onto Odmir's sleeping hammock and tore right through it. This caused stones to fall from above, which, of course, hit Odmir. In the night that came, Emilay let forth gasps of a like Odmir had never known. Being in a small cave within the earth, the smell lingered and refused to leave. Illorn too awoke from it, and upon so he saw Odmir standing against a wall, silent in his misery. Odmir never yelled at Emilay. At first he smiled, even at his accidental mischief. But as the incidents continued to occur, he began to sigh, then grunt. His frustrations then led him to moan, but only silently. In the morning he stepped without and grabbed Illorn by his linen shirt and, in a low voice, said to him, "Who is your friend, and what is this great harm he is doing unto my life?" Then Illorn assured him, "He is your brother's son." "No, no, no, he is no son of my brother. That animal, nay, thing, cannot be acting on its own nature. Who sent it here to cause disarray into my well-being? Was it your father?" "Nay, I pray you, he is not an agent of your demise. Matter of factly, he is come hence from my home on my want. He is to fight, as I am." Odmir laughed. "No, no, no. I know thy father, and your father is wise. Never would he ever allow such a being to accompany him, or be nigh him, for that matter. No, this cannot be. I must rid of him." Then Illorn became afraid, for this man that allowed him to sojourn in his cave was not well at mind. His want for ousting unwanted guests was unbeknownst to Illorn, and forby he pondered if Omir would slay Emilay if it needed to be done. "Although," said Odmir, "for thy soul of thy bow that was wrought by me, I shall do him and thee no harm. But I vouchsafe you my warning. Never again will your friend do mischief near or in my place, or suffer you shall." Evening came, and there was peace. Illorn had convinced Emilay to sit and touch nothing, for his hand was reckless, and did little good for anyone. Illorn did as bade, and sealed the cave, after which he returned to the fire that danced their shadows onto the cave walls. Odmir let in a deep breath, and invited Emilay to sit across from him. "I'm guessing you're lost, and are wishing to return to your path," said Odmir. Both Illorn and Emilay nodded. "Well, unless you are foolish enough to attempt the journey alone, I will lead you to where it is you wish to go. However, you, Illorn, may remain with me for many months, for you eat little. But as for you, Emilay, suppose, son of my brother, you eat much, and anon I shall have naught for winter's store. Therefore, you must leave. May you go east or west, north, or wheresoever you hunger carries you. I don't care. It's not of my concern." Emilay reached for his spoon ere the meal was done, and his hand was thereby slapped by Oddmere. "Uncle," said Emilay, "I'm told you fled the war. Why is that?" By his eyes, Illorn could tell that Oddmere did not like the question, but Emilay could hardly know better. Oddmere answered him, "My leaving is a private matter." "Are you scared of the owls? My father tells me he is not surprised, for my father's father had called you cowardice for many years, so it is said." Oddmere gritted his teeth. "There are no owls. Hear you owls at night?" "Yes, actually. I hear them from time to time." Illorn put a hand on Emilay to keep him from saying more. "If you are as empty-headed as you are hungry, then may the gods help me. How dare you, I say, eat my food and abode mine home, and yet Dyas say me a coward?" Oddmere was beginning to shout, which he seldom did, save when being injured. "I'm not saying you're a coward," Emilay retorted. "I'm saying my father does so. But you have not yet told me, or Illorn, why you live here." "I like it here," shouted Oddmere. Emilay's mind was calm and confused, as it was never anything else, lest he was afraid or hungry. "But may I—" "Enough! You, fat boy, have driven me closer to madness in a day than all blood, screaming, yelling, shouting, and hoving and crying, and all that blasted owls and their cursing, hooing, and hunting in the entirety of this hellish bloody landscape." "But, uncle—" "May the matron and her servants and the stars and their gods above me smite me if I'm your uncle. You leave tomorrow. And fie, if you awake me again with your pestilence, I will force you outside and gladly watch you be pecked apart by the damned owls. And I shall say it again, owls, yes, owls, gods be blasted." Oddmere sat still in a pant, breathing heavily. Had he yelled any louder, the cave would have crumbled and crushed them beneath the earth. And still, as Illorn was becoming frightened by the anger that was thick like smoke, Emilay seemed to have little notice of it. Again he sat still, staring with his eyebrow-less eyes, with an odd smile that seemed want to his nature. He said nothing for some moments, and then looked into the boiling soup before him. "Lo, the soup is done.